Hey everyone, it's Jen with Spirited Saturdays, and this week we're talking about anxiety. Anxiety is for sure often an inherent part of eating disorders, of the experience of having an eating disorder, of what led to the eating disorder, and then you cope with it, through behaviors, symptoms. Or it could be a result of the eating disorder because your brain got messed with, and then obviously malnutrition can or whatever kind of eating disorder it is can create an anxiety within you. So then you have that almost as a residual effect. So it could be any number of things, and there are many different ways that you can connect having anxiety and having that be a struggle with you, for you, and having an eating disorder or any kind of addiction. You can apply this to really any. This is really general. So, I mean, for me, I think that what happened was I channeled my anxiety into my eating disorder. Interestingly, I was getting these panic attacks before I relapsed, and I had a good 4 years, so I was pretty, I wasn't, I was overeating mildly. It wasn't anything that was like detrimental to my life I was living. So I think during those years, I certainly wasn't at peace with food, but I don't think I would have said I had an eating disorder. I relapsed. Um, 4 years into that, and maybe like 6 months or so before that relapse, I started having panic attacks often. I mean, at least twice a week, and that's a lot for a full out panic attack to have at all is very difficult. So yeah, for me to have them kind of suddenly creep up and have them be like once or twice a week, if or more, um, was very unsettling, and I had to do a lot of work around them, I don't know how much that was working because I ended up obviously relapsing. And the interesting part of that was that when I relapsed, panic attacks stopped. They stopped. The anxiety that resulting from, well, it wasn't too much like anxiety, it was more panic, but yeah, the actual episodes of panic attacks really did stop, and just became like one of the many purposes my eating disorder served for me. Apparently, it stopped me from having these panic attacks, which, the connection that I made later in my mind, I didn't see it as that way. I didn't see the connection. I didn't even realize I stopped having them, when the eating disorder began, until like a while later. But yeah, subconsciously, I'm sure that the eating disorder was validating um, the the purpose it was serving by relieving, so to speak, not really, but of me of the panic attacks. But what was actually happening, which I for sure know now, is that it was redirecting my anxiety. It was channeling my anxiety through something else, and it was containing it. It was giving me something to like contain it within, which really was the same kind of thing, when I first developed an eating disorder. I was very anxious about my direction in my life. I was really anxious about keeping up with school, or meeting expectations, or fulfilling, goals, or not disappointing others. And I was able to really, and I use the term able very ironically, not really, but I channeled those worries, those anxious thoughts, those anxieties into very concrete behaviors, very, understandable behaviors. I could contain it in that. And that is one of the many purposes the eating disorder served both times. And actually, I wanted to say the first time was bulimia, and the second time was anorexia. So for both of those things, and binge eating as well, and it came into play with both, but more so with the bulimia. But anyway, anxiety was kind of filtered through the eating disorder, and I didn't feel anything anymore. So, including sadness, including happiness, it was basically flat. And that included anxiety. So, it was very all or nothing. One little specification I want to probably say, when it was bulimia, I probably was more on the ups and downs of mood swings and things like that. But in terms of feeling anxious about anything that was non-eating disorder related, I felt that that was a purpose that the eating disorder served. That all of the anxiety was just filtered. It was just became about food choices. So that was, and later, like with the anorexia, I became very anxious beforehand, and with the panic attacks, and as soon as the eating disorder started, it's not that I didn't feel anxious anymore. I stopped having those panic attacks, but I felt a heightened sense of anxiety constantly, but it was all channeled into food decisions. It was all the world became very small, and the smaller it got, the more I nitpicked, and the more ritualistic things got, and really the less space I had to be free around me, within myself. I mean, the more constrained my whole entire world got. So my brain really got quite a blow, like with all that. It was really, I needed to be very patient with myself when I was stabilized behaviorally, because, and whatever body weight wise, physically healthy again. I still needed to be very patient because some of the stuff doesn't just go away when you are physically healthy again. The mental stuff, the psychological stuff is very real. I think that the brain really does get used to different patterns and different ways of thinking. And I mean, if you think about it, it kind of saw it as a survival mechanism. It kind of saw it as this coping survival thing. Like it had to, perform these rituals in order to keep you alive, like in order to keep you okay and safe, and also on the flip side, compensate for your body in other ways in order to really keep you physically alive. Which is why we stop, not we, all of us, but sometimes you stop getting your period because, it has to reprioritize. And so a lot of these things take a little while, or a long while after, the really rough physical piece of it is over. And that includes the anxiety, and you may then begin to feel anxious about your life in other aspects, or you may begin to feel anxious about making the perfect food decisions for your recovery, but which is kind of counterproductive. So I just remember for me how it worked was like for like a year, or at least, after I was physically healthy and I was maintaining recovery, still very very ritualistic about things, and it took a while for that to subside, and I had to really work on that, and ritualistic, not just about food, but about, like, I felt like I had like OCD in my life, in many aspects of my days. So, but that did subside. So I know for me, that was not something, like, I didn't need to get a diagnosis for and treatment for OCD. It was really was like a lingering effect of the eating disorder. But my point about that is that if you're feeling anything like this, in any way, whatever eating disorder it is and however it's playing out, the longer you're in recovery, the the better your chances are of it passing, because it will pass. You need to definitely do some work on it, to gently allow it to pass. That's a big word for me lately. Allowing. That's another huge word, especially for anxiety. My goodness. Yeah, I think that's a big one. Allowing the anxiety to pass through you. That's a big one. Not pushing it away, not resisting it, but just simply allowing it to be, understanding, having compassion toward it, like it's serving some purpose. It thinks it needs to be there for some reason. So don't judge it, don't get mad at it, don't resent it, don't try to push it away. Like, just understand that it's there because it's like thinking something is off, whether that's reality or not. Um, and I like to think of it as just working with it, helping it move away. Um, and that's kind of the approach I like to take with it these days, is accepting that it is there to begin with, because I do have anxiety sometimes, just not in that kind of way that had to do with my eating disorder, but life happens, and you know I am probably more anxious than some people I know, like just generally. So I know that it's something that I need to deal with. But sometimes stuff happens that really makes me anxious, and I know that that's really, really, really not serving me, and it's also really hindering me. And I really, in those moments, I have to take some time to recognize what's going on and kind of see that I have more control over it than I may think, and also see where it's coming from in my body, because, or how it's being felt, how it's being sensed in my body. And kind of, once you do that, or once I do that, sometimes it minimizes it. It gives it less, it takes away the power. It's like okay, I'm feeling this sensation, but it doesn't have to be all consuming, like I'm feeling the anxiety in my whatever, any part of my body. Okay, that's one part of my body. It doesn't mean that my entire body is feeling miserable and awful, so maybe I should focus my attention on the part that's feeling okay. Or maybe, I should notice the moments when I'm not anxious and really focus on those and try to bring those moments into my life and see if those moments, if certain things can relieve bouts of anxiety. Sometimes I do have this like free floating anxiety. It's not often, but sometimes it can go away. Sometimes it doesn't go away right away. And I think it's allowing it to be, realizing that nothing catastrophic is actually happening, telling yourself that. I'm not saying that telling yourself that is going to make it go away. I'm not trying to be idealistic about it. I know that sometimes those two things don't quite connect. But so if you can't, so if telling yourself isn't quite what you need, I think expressing it, because expressing it targets it directly. Because maybe it doesn't understand words. Maybe it doesn't understand the thoughts that counteract it. Maybe it doesn't care. It doesn't register, perhaps. But it will register the visceral experience of creating something, of drawing, of playing music, of singing, of doing something different with your body that brings about a different kind of feeling. We talked last week about the interrupting like a critical moment, and maybe by bringing like I don't know, what is it, like just enacting a different kind of sensory experience, so that you are kind of snapped out of that moment. So just something like that can help divert it into something pleasurable or positive or neutral or just different, to be able to get through it, allow it to be, allow it to pass. Always reach out for help. and this video is nearing 15 minutes, so don't want to get cut off. But thank you for watching, for listening. You're great. See you next week.